An unusual bark from his golden retriever, Max, was what first alerted Ben Mitchell during their morning walk. They were moving through the private wildlife reserve that borders Kruger National Park, and Max had wandered ahead. But this was not his normal alert bark, it was far more urgent. Ben quickened his pace, the South African summer sun already beating down mercilessly despite the early hour. Pushing through the dense brush separating the trail from the Sabi River's muddy banks, he called out, "Max. What have you found, boy?" What Ben witnessed next would be seared permanently into his memory. Chest deep in the slow-moving water stood Max, his golden coat slick and dark. Held gently between his jaws was a small, bedraggled, and utterly limp animal. The dog was struggling determinedly against the current, making his way toward shore. Recognition dawned on Ben, and his breath caught. It wasn't an antelope or a monkey in his dog's mouth. It was a lion cub. "Jesus Christ," Ben whispered, his hand instinctively moving toward the tranquilizer pistol he always carried, a necessary precaution for a wildlife veterinarian living on the edge of big cat territory. Max reached the muddy bank and carefully laid down his burden. The cub couldn't have been more than a few months old, its golden fur now dark and matted. It wasn't moving. Ben's years of veterinary training kicked in as he dropped to his knees beside it, his fear of nearby adults momentarily forgotten. He felt for a pulse against the cub's neck. It was there, faint and irregular, but present. The cub had aspirated water, it was drowning from within. Gently, Ben positioned the small cat on its side, applying careful pressure to its rib cage before rolling it slightly to let the water drain. Max stood guard, his posture alert but calm, intelligent eyes fixed on the cub. "Good boy, Max," Ben murmured as he worked. "You did good." After what felt like an eternity, the cub sputtered, coughing up river water. A feeble meal escaped its throat as its eyes fluttered open, revealing disoriented amber irises. Relief flooded Ben, but it was short-lived. They were still in an impossibly dangerous situation. This cub belonged to a pride. As if summoned by the thought, a low, rumbling growl echoed from the thicket across the narrow river. Ben's blood ran cold as he slowly looked up. There, not 40 yards away on the opposite bank, stood a lioness, her eyes locked directly on them. "Don't move, Max," Ben whispered, his hand inching toward his pistol. The trained golden retriever froze. The lioness paced the shore, clearly agitated. Behind her, Ben could make out more tawny shapes moving in the brush. The pride was gathering. The cub at his feet squirmed weakly, making small mewing sounds that carried clearly across the water. The lioness responded with another rumble, this time less threatening, more communicative. Astonishingly, the cub lifted its head and attempted a pathetic squeak in reply. "She knows her baby is alive," Ben murmured. "That might buy us some time." With exquisite slowness, he reached for his satellite phone, never taking his eyes off the predators. He needed backup, a ranger with a vehicle. They were too far from safety to carry the weakened cub, and leaving it was a death sentence. Then, the lioness stopped pacing. She stood stock still, her gaze unwavering. What happened next defied everything Ben knew. Instead of charging or continuing her threats, the lioness lay down at the river's edge, her eyes still fixed on her cub. "She's waiting," Ben realized with a jolt. "She's afraid of the water." The pieces clicked together. The cub must have fallen in, been carried downstream, and the mother, likely also fearful of the water, had tracked it along the bank but couldn't reach it. Max whined softly, looking between Ben and the cub with obvious concern. He edged closer and gently nudged the cub with his nose. To Ben's amazement, the little lion weakly lifted a paw to bat at Max's muzzle. The interaction was so incongruous, predator and potential prey in what looked almost like play, that Ben nearly missed the sound of an approaching vehicle. "Dr. Mitchell?" a voice called through the brush. It was Sifo, the reserve's head ranger. "We got your message." "What's the situation?" "We have a lion cub, possibly from the Riverview Pride," Ben replied, his voice low and controlled. "Max pulled it from the river. It was drowning. The mother and the pride are across the water, watching us." Sifo appeared, freezing as he took in the scene. His experienced eyes assessed the cub, the dog, and the watching lions. "The vehicle is just up the bank," he said quietly. "We need to move. That water is low enough for them to cross if they decide to." "The cub needs medical attention," Ben said. "It's aspirated water and is hypothermic despite the heat." Sifo nodded, understanding. "We'll take it to the rehabilitation center. If it recovers, we can attempt reintroduction." As carefully as possible, Ben lifted the weakly protesting cub. The movement triggered an immediate reaction. The lioness rose with a threatening growl. "Easy," Ben murmured. "We're trying to help." With Sifo leading, they slowly backed toward the Land Rover, Max staying close to Ben's heels. The lioness watched, muscles tensed, but she remained on her side of the river. Ben placed the cub gently into a transport crate lined with thermal blankets. Max jumped in without being told, positioning himself protectively next to it. "I've never seen anything like this," Sifo said as they drove away, glancing nervously in the mirror. "Your dog is either the bravest or the most foolish animal I've ever met." Ben reached back to scratch Max's ears, his heart still racing. "He's just doing what he was bred to do." For him, saving lives doesn't stop at species boundaries. What none of them knew then was that this remarkable rescue was only the beginning of an even more extraordinary story.